How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to part number 2 of year number 3 of our Washington Commanders rebuild. Right now, we are 6-2 in our year. If you remember, at the end of last episode, we finished off by making a trade with DeMarcus Lawrence. We sent him to, I think it was the Texans. But taking a look at our schedule right here, ultimately beating the Eagles twice, we ended up losing to the Cowboys, beat the Jags, beat the Giants, beat the Panthers, beat the 49ers, and then finally the Steelers ended our winning streak. But now, starting this episode off, we are going to be facing off against the Dallas Cowboys, who last year beat us twice, pretty much ever since we've become the general manager. We've only been able to beat them once out of 5. So let's see if we can potentially try to get that second win there. We do know the Cowboys have been struggling so far this season. If we scroll over here and look at it, the Cowboys are 3-4. So theoretically speaking, this should be a game that we could go out there and win, especially with how strong our team has been. So we ended up beating the Dallas Cowboys, kind of exercising one of those demons that we've been playing through the last couple of years, ultimately beating a team that we should have beat the first game, or pardon me, I think it was the second game of the season, but ultimately we got the win here today, splitting the season series, and we also outgained them 342 to 276. But taking a look here at the player stats, Derek Carr got in for a bit of a game, so that tells me that Klein ultimately went down for a period of time. No passing touchdowns by either of our quarterbacks in this game. Dak Prescott got a touchdown in an interception, but he was sacked 3 times. So now taking a look at our running game, Brian Robinson found the back of the end zone 3 times in this game with 86 yards. No wonder why our coach is asking for a potential dev update. So I should probably explain, whenever I see the dev updates, I am just continuing the sim like I do. I don't want to influence the games in any way possible. I want the game to say, if you know what, he can get in the end zone or he can do this, then he should. Sometimes I feel like maybe they might be a little scummy by not giving it, but ultimately that's the sim. Some games you just have to be a really good player, but Brian Robinson could potentially be moved up to that superstar, which would be huge for a run game. But taking a look, Luke Hunt still having a pretty good game. Terry McLaurin also having a decent one. Jahan Dotson taking a little bit of a step back. Now looking at our blocking, Chris Nix with the 2 sacks. He really has been kind of the weak link on our team so far this season, which is annoying. Tyree Wilson leading the team in tackles in today's game. Also had a half a sack, and Leslie Moody with the sack, and Isaiah Simmons and Wilson both getting the sack, and Isaiah Wilson also getting an interception in this game. One thing that I have been thinking about, and I kind of thought about this a bunch last year, we often see Isaiah Simmons get a handful of sacks throughout the year. It maybe might not be a terrible idea to potentially look at him as being an edge rusher as well on this team, because he seems to get it at a fairly consistent rate from that linebacker spot. I know at college he kind of did a lot of everything, so it might be worth a look. Maybe not now, but maybe in the future. So after we just talked about Isaiah Simmons and how good of a game that he had, we ultimately signed him to a 2-year contract extension. One of our first signs that we ever made as a general manager on this team, ultimately has just been nothing but good for us, and we're keeping him around for 2 more years and ultimately only paying him $10 million a season. And potentially, if we maybe move him to edge rush, that could be a hell of a deal. So ultimately, we ended up beating the Houston Texans 24-17. Another close game, but you know what? We're still pretty decent at those. Outgained the Texans by over 100 yards. Let's take a look here at some of the stats. Lance Klein, 3 passing touchdowns to the 1 interception. CJ Stroud, the only 1 touchdown, but he was sacked twice. So Klein gives up the interception, but ultimately having himself a pretty good day, just a little short of that 300 yard. Brian Robinson, the 74 rushing yards. So pretty good day rushing the ball, but not able to find the back of the end zone unless he had a massive day receiving, which unfortunately he didn't, so he's not going to get that dev trade boost, but Terry McLaurin and Luke Hunt both doing good. Luke Hunt getting in the end zone 2 times while McLaurin gets in there once. Taking a look at the blocking, no sacks were given up. Now taking a look at our defense, Davis led the team in tackles and sacks. Isaiah Simmons, again, man, he's just constantly getting after the quarterback, but Moody and Meadows both getting in there for a half a sack, no interceptions. So taking a look here at the official playoff tree so far, and right now we are in the first seed in the NFC. My goodness, this team has been doing some kind of magic. We ultimately got our third loss of the year against, I think it was the Indianapolis Colts, but still need to have a strong second half of the year. And right now, we are firmly in control of this division, or this conference, I should say, and it's looking good, but let's try to get that first seed. So this week we went into Arizona and we took on the Cardinals in what was a game of essentially just a shootout and us holding on to it at the very end. The Cardinals outgained us 469 to 424. Absolutely monster game, and the two quarterbacks that went number 2 and number 4 in their respective draft classes, finally in the third matchup, Sherman gets the better of the two, and Klein ultimately doesn't necessarily have that same day, and he was sacked 4 times. So the last 2 weeks, Klein has been taking some hits, which is really annoying to kind of see, but ultimately the 330 passing yards, 3 TDs, no interception, is nothing to be upset about. It's obviously took there. Brian Robinson, 79 rushing yards, the 1 TD getting in there, but taking a look at this, Okonkwo getting the 1 touchdown, Jahan Dotson and Brian Robinson both getting receiving yards. Terry McLaurin getting the 86. Who was giving up the sacks in this game? Chris Nix. Oh, that's so annoying. He's just, it's been, after last year only giving up, I think what it was, like 3 sacks in his first year as a starter. He's given up so much more this year, but Connor Williams and Sam Cosmi also giving up those sacks in this game. Reggie Griffin leading the team in tackles. Taking a look at the sacks, Deron Payne was the only guy to get a sack. I thought we got after him much more than what we did. Only got him the 1 time, so apologies there, but still a little bit annoying. No interceptions on the game whatsoever. Ultimately, we were able to beat the Rams in another phenomenal offensive performance for us, where we're getting back-to-back games of over 400 yards gained, 38 to 20 in this one. Taking a look here at the stats, Sam Howell, I saw during free agency, he ultimately signed a 5-year deal with the Rams during his, I guess, revenge game tour against us, are not able to do it, getting sacked twice, throwing an interception. But Lance Klein, 311 yards, only the 1 TD, but he was also sacked twice again in this game. But the completion percentage, one thing I haven't really been talking about, is still looking good. That was 83. Brian Robinson was able to get into the end zone twice with 88 yards, and Lance Klein getting his first rushing touchdown of the game. Derek Carr also getting in there and getting a rushing touchdown. Look at him go in this one. Terry McLaurin, 114 receiving yards, and Luke Hunt with 69 rushing yards and a touchdown. So all good numbers looking there. Taking a look at the blocking, Wyatt Teller gave it up, so it must have been a running back that ultimately allowed that extra sack. And then taking a look at these sacks, Isaiah Simmons with 2 sacks in this game. Funny enough, the last 2 games, I had him as our starting right end edge rusher, and he got absolutely nothing. And our edge rushing has kind of slowed down a touch here at the moment, which has been irritating. But the second that I put him back at outside linebacker, and last that I checked, we're in a 4-3, so he's playing more of a interior inside linebacker, an off-ball linebacker, but he's just racking up these sacks, I guess, from the linebacking spot, so I'm not going to be too upset with it, if that makes sense. But Derek Force ultimately getting the interception, but another big win for the club in a big game that ultimately was going to test our team, going up against a very talented Tennessee Titans team that absolutely spent this offseason trying to improve their roster. We were able to get our third 400-yard game against the Titans. Taking a look here at the box score, Lance Klein 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, was sacked once. Tua Tagovailoa had a very similar day, only 2 yards more, and then also had the 3 passing touchdowns, but we're not able to get after the quarterback. One of the things that was kind of the strength of our team at the beginning of the year is kind of lessening a little bit, and ultimately just very getting annoying. But 75 rushing yards and a touchdown, but Klein getting his second rushing touchdown on the year. Luke Hunt, oh my goodness, 154 yards, 3 TDs. He was an absolute menace. Okonkwo getting 81, Terry McLaurin 53, and Jahan Dotson also getting 51. Gotta like it. Wyatt Teller again giving up another sack. Kind of been one of those things that's just been weird, and unfortunately, just the no sacks on the day. Isaiah Simmons leads the team in tackles. He's just kind of been the best player for our team right now. 3 tackles for loss. Same thing with Deron Payne. But yeah, let's continue on with this good form. So beating the Seattle Seahawks 31-17, ultimately coming to an end for our 400-yard our gain on offense. Actually got outscored on the offensive side of the yards gained. Take a look here at the box stats. Desmond Ridder, the new quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, but Lance Klein not necessarily having an amazing game. Less than 200 passing yards. Only the 1 TD, was sacked once. Desmond Ridder definitely got the better of the two with the 2 TDs, did throw the interception, and was sacked only the 1 time. So kind of annoying that that's ultimately happening. Derek Carr ended up getting into the game as well for a play, so that's interesting to say the least. Brian Robinson, 96 rushing yards, the 1 TD. Lance Klein getting into the end zone, and same thing with Stanley. So ultimately, our quarterback is actually finding a way to get into the end zone and score touchdowns. It just has been more with his legs lately. Terry McLaurin leads the team in receptions and in yards, and then Luke Hunt with 3 catches and 44. But Nate Silverman, the tight end that we drafted in the 3rd round, finally gets his first touchdown of the season, ultimately getting more receptions than Jahan Dotson. But then again, we knew that he's on a cheap deal moving forward, and you know what? He's only the 3rd wide receiver. We'd like to see that a little bit more often, but it is what it is. Who gave up the sack? In Zerma, our left tackle. I think that might potentially be his first sack given up this year. Isaiah Simmons, again, just absolutely being a beast for us this season. The sack, Tyree Wilson getting that, and the interception coming to Emmanuel Forbes. So, taking a look here at the official playoff picture, it is us and the Buccaneers at 12-4. So this final game of the year, unfortunately, we did lose to the Minnesota Vikings, which is annoying because if we ultimately won that game, we would have locked up first place likely. So this final week is going to determine if we get the bye or we're playing in the wild card after what was such a strong season. And right now, leading the NFL is the Las Vegas Raiders. I can't remember if we played them this season or not, but this Vegas Raiders team doing very, very well right now at 14-2, looking like a bat out of hell. But we are currently the 2nd best team technically in the NFL by the rating, but the Ravens do have a better record than us, so technically 3rd. And you know what? I'm not even going to be too upset with that. Being 3rd place in the NFL is not a bad thing, but a very, very big, important game up against the New York Giants. So unfortunately, we did not win, and we are in the wild card round, and unfortunately, it just so happens to be up against our rival, the team that has been kind of beating us down these last few years, but we did get the win over them this year, so we're split the series so far, but we're going to have to face the Dallas Cowboys in the wild card round. The Raiders also ended up losing, so Baltimore gets the first overall seed. So both of the teams that were first overall seeds going into that final week are now seed number 2. This is just definitely not the way that I wanted to have this. It would have been super nice to have that bye, but let's go take a look at the actual stats so far this year. taking a look here at Lance Klein so far this year, he's actually fourth in passing yards, but something a little bit annoying is he's down from last year of where he had, I think it was the 33 passing touchdowns to 26. He's definitely down on the interceptions. That has been the best of his career so far. 69 completion percentage, only the 12 or the 20 sacks this year. So again, that is down on the year. So not going to be too upset with that, but a little annoyed that the passing touchdowns weren't as much this year. Brian Robinson, after what was pretty much a horrific start at the beginning of the year, 1,169 rushing yards, the 17 rushing TDs, so a touchdown per game essentially for him. Lance Klein, however, he also made it up on the ground, getting the 6 rushing touchdowns, which, to be honest, I don't think he had ever done before. I don't think he's ever had a rushing touchdown going into this season. So we just take a look at the rushing. Okay, he had 1 rushing touchdown in his rookie year, but didn't really have any year prior to, but just able to find it, I guess, this year. So I guess we'll be more accepting of it. Taking a look at the receiving yards, Luke Hunt, again, he's just an absolute machine. 1,258 yards, 13 touchdowns. Terry McLaurin back to being a 1,000-yard receiver. Okonkwo, again, 767 yards, 6 TDs from a tight end is absolutely phenomenal. Even Jahan Dotson with 676 yards and 2 TDs as our third wide receiver is phenomenal. Brian Robinson Jr., the almost 300 receiving yards and the 2 receiving touchdowns is a phenomenal season if you add up what he did in the passing or the rushing game as well. And Chris Nix with the 8 sacks on the year. Connor Williams, the center that we brought in, gave up 4. Wyatt Teller 3, so that's a hell of a lot better than what it was last year. Mike Nzerma with 3, and then Sam Cosmi only giving up the 1. So you know what? He's having himself a pretty good year. He also had a better year. And you know what? I think he also had a better year as well, because I think he had, closer to 8 last season. Let's just take a quick look here. Yeah, he gave up 8, so significantly better on the season, but Nix is definitely going to try to need to improve that from the season before. But Jermaine Davis leading the team in tackles and tackles for loss ultimately goes to Leslie Moody. And then our sack leader, Isaiah Simmons, with 7.5, with Moody coming in at 7 being number 2, Deron Payne with 6, along with Tyree Wilson. So definitely down year for him with only the going from 11 to 6. But you know what? We're still pretty happy with the production, and we have him pretty cheap. But Emmanuel Forbes leads the team with 2 interceptions. Isaiah Simmons, this dude was just an absolute animal all year long. Jermaine Davis, again, was fairly good. No real interceptions from Griffin or Emerson. So a little bit annoying there, even though he does have that superstar X factor. I guess people just simply weren't throwing his way. But now taking a look at Cameron Dickerson, 9 for 14 is strictly just not good enough. Granted, he had the 1 field goal block, but he would still ultimately, if that one went in, he would have 4 missed kicks. He didn't really have a ton of opportunities. He had 2 extra points blocked. He ultimately missed 1. So Dickerson, I guess, leaving a handful of points on the board. So that's a little frustrating to see. But let's get into this playoff game against the Cowboys. So an absolute masterclass by our team, winning 39-7 over the Dallas Cowboys, a team that I was a little bit worried about coming into this game. But Lance Klein, after not really having a massive game where he threw a bunch of touchdowns, finally gets those 4 passing touchdowns in this one. So just absolutely huge. Dak Prescott threw an interception. Taking a look at the running game, Brian Robinson kind of had a little bit of a day off, I guess. Only the 14 rushing attempts, 66 yards. Then taking a look at the receiving, Jahan Dotson, 158, 2 TDs. Okonkwo with the 1, and then we also have Terry McLaurin with the 1. The surprise, I guess, is Luke Hunt with only 38 yards, so they must have just been targeting him and saying, you're not allowed to get it. The sacks given up in this game, Chris Nix and Connor Williams, man, just being absolute holes on this offensive line. Just, so frustrating to say the least. Tarek Forrest, did not lead. It was actually Jermaine Davis getting the total amount of tackles in this one. Taking a look at the sacks, Jermaine Davis, and who would have guessed Isaiah Simmons, and then Curl and Wilson also combined for a sack, and then Curl also getting the interception in that one. No TDs, but hey, we got a win against our rivals in the playoffs. It is a good day. So now taking a look here at the playoff schedule, we are going up against the team that eliminated us in year number 1, the Atlanta Falcons. They ultimately beat the 49ers, but we are a much better team here at the moment. Buccaneers versus the Bears after the Bears beat the Packers. Good job, boys. Love to see it. And Raiders also ended up beating the Titans in a just classic 7-3 playoff game. But let's get into this game against the Falcons. And we have done it. We beat the Atlanta Falcons 20-17 with Geno Smith as their starting quarterback in this one. Let's take a look at the stats in this one. Geno Smith, 2 TDs, 1 interception, 272 passing yards. Lance Klein, 247 with the 1 passing touchdown, but not giving it up. That's what we like to see. Brian Robinson, 72 rushing yards, the 1 TD. And then taking a look at Hunt, he had a good game, 8 catches, 105 yards. And then Jahan Dotson getting into the end zone, but it looks like he also got injured in this game. Hopefully it's nothing serious and we can continue on. Taking a look at the sacks, Mike Nzerma gives up a sack. Don't really like to see it. Martin Emerson and Curl both leading the team in tackles. And then taking a look at the sacks, Sterling Harrington, one of our backup outside linebackers, ended up getting a sack in this game. Tyree Wilson and Leslie Moody both getting sacks as well. I wonder why he ended up getting into the game. No one was injured. I guess just one of those plays. And Jermaine Davis also got an interception. So we are in the championship round going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in what is going to be a tough game. They are the 1 seed. We are the 2 seed. It's going to be very interesting to watch. And then on the opposite side, it's the Ravens taking on the Bengals in what should be a very, very good matchup. Ended up losing to Zach Wilson and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in what was a game that was close pretty much the entire way, all the way up until the very end of it, where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the 4th quarter pull away. Let's take a look at this one. Zach Wilson with 3 passing touchdowns and the 1 interception. Zach Klein just with the no passing touchdowns, just kind of been one of those games for him that we've seen from him this year. Had the good yardage, but ultimately had that mistake. And Zach Wilson besting our quarterback, Brian Robinson, getting injured alongside the game. Klein getting the 1 rushing touchdown. Luke Hunt having himself a good game. Taking a look here, Chris Nix gave up 2 sacks. Curl led the team in tackles, and then for sacks, we got Leslie Moody, KJ Henry, and then Justin Meadows, and then who got our interception, Derek Forrest. That is, I guess, us in the playoffs. So we are ultimately looking at the Pro Bowl because we could not beat the Buccaneers, and Zach Wilson as their starting quarterback. Still a little bit in disbelief on that, but Lance Klein, he is going to be #1 quarterback in the NFC. He gets his first Pro Bowl, so we know we have one. Last year, I think we had either 7 or 8 guys make it to the Pro Bowl. Let's see if we can match that here. Stanley, our fullback, gets to the Pro Bowls. That's 2. Hunt, I think that's his first Pro Bowl. He gets so that makes 3 for us. Taking a look here, and unfortunately, we don't have our tight end Okonkwo making it to the Pro Bowl for 3 years in a row. A little bit unfortunate. Wyatt Teller back-to-back years goes definitely, I think, more deserving of it this year, so that makes 4. Continuing to look on Sam Cosmi, he gets there for back-to-back years. That's going to make 5. Continuing to look here. Do we have anyone going? I would be surprised if we don't have Isaiah Simmons in this one, and there he is, so that make that 6. Jermaine Davis make that 7, and then continuing to look, do we have any of our corners get there? No, we do not. Do we have any of our safeties get in? And no, we don't. And Stonehouse, that is going to make 8 Pro Bowlers this year. So taking a look at it, ultimately the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going out and winning the Super Bowl this year, and Rachaad White is going to be the Super Bowl MVP, but Joe Burrow wins both the Offensive Player of the Year and the MVP of the season, not to be, questioned. I think he had like 54 passing touchdowns. I think he was close to breaking the record. Jeff Powell, the head coach of the Raiders, wins Coach of the Year, and then the Defensive Player of the Year is Quentin Williams. Ernest Fairley, the running back that we're looking at, he wins Offensive Rookie of the Year, and Santiago, also of the Ravens, wins it for this particular season. And so, again, 3 years in a row for us where we don't get an award, but hey, we made it every single year. We've made it one game deeper into the playoffs. Let's see if we can potentially try to do it one more season. But before we head off in this episode, we are going to take a look at some of the retirements. I'm not going to really talk about any individual, but if we see someone that is big, for instance, like Trent Williams, we will look at that, having a massive Hall of Famer head into retirement. Micah Hyde and Michael Pierce, Teron Armstead also retiring, so a bunch of good players there. Kyle Juszczyk retiring. He's now with the Raiders, so big one there. Tyler Higbee, Brandon Sheriff retiring with the Green Bay Packers, Xavier Howard with the Lions. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about so many of the guys, but when they're big names, for instance, like Tyrann Mathieu and Javon Hargrave, also going in there. Connor McGruven, who was one of our centers for the last 2 years, retired with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who ultimately won the Super Bowl. So maybe that's just what we were missing, is having McGruven there. Mike Evans also retiring, and we had Kyle Fuller, Jordan Hicks, Shelby Harris, and Derek Carr, just all guys that had that mentor trait for us, that were just older guys that we could help fill out our roster. So no real shocks there. David Onyemata, Trent Brown, Matthew Stafford retiring. And those are the official retirements of the season. But that is ultimately going to do it here in this episode, guys. Thank you all very much for hanging out with us. Make sure to check back tomorrow for the start of season number 4. Peace.